All right, we're going to move right into our next panel. So I'm going to introduce Kristie and Chris onto the stage. Very aptly timed as we talked about the Bushel business account and fraud. We are going to have a discussion around cybersecurity, fraud, and risk management. All right, have a seat, guys. Let's just go ahead and do some quick introductions. Chris, why don't you start?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Chris Sherman, and I'm the CEO of TechSupport.Farm, and we're an IT and cybersecurity company here in West Fargo. We serve farms all across the United States. So,
Kristie?
Good morning. I'm Kristie Roes. I am the head of GRC at Bushel. I've been with Bushel for about 5 years, but in financial services and GRC compliance for a little over 30.
Awesome. Can you describe what GRC stands for?
Sorry. Banking is all acronyms, so I kind of fall into that old habit. Governance, risk, and compliance.
Yeah. All right, let's start. We've got a group of agribusiness customers in the audience. Let's talk about some of the risks that agribusinesses should be paying attention to right now. Chris, if you want to start.
yeah, I think that the biggest risk that we need to be looking at is the compromise from our clients. You know, as agribusinesses, if we are already using security stacks and proper, cybersecurity software and practices, that's great. But really, it's the new emerging threat is from our clients. It's the idea of, email filtration, that sort of thing is great. But if you're getting an email from a compromised client, that becomes a weakness to your organization right now.
Kristie, anything you want to add for risks they should be watching out for?
Yeah, I think that our biggest threat is the ghost in our email. Once we have emails that are compromised, that fraudster will sit there and watch, and they're silently paying attention to who we're emailing, what we're saying, the tone of our voice, how we're saying it. And then when an opportunity arises, they capitalize on it. If we're talking about purchasing or paying, they'll jump in and try to help us or help them by changing their payment method or account.
I think oftentimes fraud and some cybersecurity issues can happen during busy times. So can you guys talk a little bit about how does a bad actor take advantage of customers like ours during the busy time of the year? Chris, you want to start with that one?
I guess I would like to circle back to kind of like what Kristie was talking about, the ghost in the email. And what we've been noticing is that, when spyware sits on a system, it's usually anywhere from 60 to 90 days before the threat actor actually makes a move. And the theory behind this is that, they're capitalizing on time and the opportunity. I think the biggest case we know is Crystal Valley Cooperative down in Mankato. They were compromised a couple years ago, first week of harvest, and it shut them down completely. And a compromise inside of a co-op or any sort of agribusiness, if it's during the off season, it's not that big of a deal. But farming is very time based, and we have a certain window of opportunity, and that's when threat actors are taking advantage of that for sure.
Kristie, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think they watch more than code. They watch the calendar. So if you're busy, if it's harvest time and you have trucks rounding the block and you guys are working 14, 16 hours a day and the phones are ringing off the hook and everybody is exhausted, that's their Christmas. That's when they're going to come in and try to capitalize on that.
Moving on to kind of payments, vendor changes, what should teams be looking at as they process payments, work with vendors, or updating account information? Kristie, maybe you take that one first.
Okay.
No, go ahead. Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead. You can.
Chris and Kristie is mixing me up here. Okay, first of all, I think it was back in the 80s, Ronald Reagan always said trust but verify, right? And that was great back then in the Cold War, but now we need to verify before we trust. And when a vendor comes in and sends out a mass email saying that, hey, we have a new online payment portal, or we're going to change our contact info or banking info, you need to let your fingers do the walking, pick up the phone, call that vendor or customer, and verify that firsthand before you actually go and follow the new instructions.
Yeah, 100%. We call it white glove at Bushel. We want to make sure that any time any payment method is changed, we're performing outreach. We're going to verify with the number that's on file that the customer's already provided us early on, rather than the one that we just got from them. We want to make sure that we are acting on behalf of the customer. The other thing that we kind of pay attention to as well is geography risk. You know, we look at where their IP address is in relation to where their operation is. We look at velocity. Are they purchasing more or less than what is typical for them? There's a lot of different factors that we want to be paying attention to, rather than just who the customer is.
Kristie, I want you to talk a little bit about Bushel's third-party risk management that we have internally. So not only with your customers, but your vendors that you use, how are you checking those out, making sure they're secure vendors and you're comfortable with them? Can you share just a little bit about that?
Yep. Our approach when we onboard anybody that is new to Bushel, as far as providing new software or a new vendor, we perform a third-party risk management assessment. Anytime we have that relationship with that vendor, it's more than just the offering that they're providing, but we're marrying into their security. We will want them to prove their security posture to us. So are going to look at their third-party auditor reports. We're going to look at any type of SOC 2, Type 2 reports that they have available to us. If they're a financial partner, we pay attention to any regulatory findings or anything that is available to us to make those decisions. Once we do that, we perform and assess a score in that initial stage, and depending on what that score is, we set them up on a cadence for review, because as you know, things can continue to happen. But we want to make sure that for our external partners that we're paying really close attention to what's going on within their posture. Internally, when we're providing or performing new feature launches or anything like that, we're doing that same amount of diligence in architecture review board to make sure that we have our posture structured the way it needs to be. Chris, anything you want to add?
I like the idea of the third-party risk management, vetting process, but I think that we now also, as agribusinesses, need to be driving that behavior downstream to our clients as well. And a lot of times, small businesses don't realize that their customers are the ones that lead to a lot of these compromises. And so if you have customers that are not using, proper email filtration software, they don't have the, proper security stack in place on their operation or their farm, that becomes an inherent risk to your business as well.
Chris, can you expand on that? How do you work with your farmer customers and agribusiness customers to help them relay that information down to their customer base?
So education and awareness is the biggest thing. I think the biggest hurdle that we've run into is that, big numbers are what catches the federal government's attention. And so, when it's in the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, that's what's getting their attention. But nobody seems to really grasp how big of a problem it is on the actual individual producer level. And when a farm loses a quarter section because they got e-sign documents from a hacker that was spoofing the bank, that is a huge hit to that family farm, but it's not something that's going to really register on the federal level, and it's not going to be a newsworthy event. And the other issue I think we don't really talk about is that, the older generation that we have in our farms is also that much more susceptible to these sorts of, financial fraud events. And we need to be raising the education and awareness. So that is the number one step that we take is education.
Kristie, what roles do internal processes play in protecting the business and its customers?
Yeah, good question. Software is great, and having it available is necessary. But if you don't have good operational processes in place, and you don't have people carrying out those processes, that software isn't going to save you. I can give you an example. Again, you're talking to an ex-banker who had employees that were with us for 30-some years that had started embezzling from an incapacitated customer's savings account. She altered the address of the statement so the customer wasn't notified. And over the course of years, she embezzled hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Trust was our weakness. When we talk about Ronald Reagan, trust was definitely our weakness, and it bypassed the controls that were in place. So that really made us take a step back and do a couple of things. Number one, there is a financial loss, obviously, but from another perspective, there's that loss of trust that you have within a community that is a very big part. So we put controls into place. We make sure that those human processes are followed, and then we utilize software too to reinforce those controls.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Chris, maybe you can answer this one. What should agribusinesses expect from their technology partners, and when it comes to protecting data, payments, and customer trust?
Okay, so first of all,
if you have a different story, you can
could we go back to the other
Yeah.
statement? I think the internal processes is so incredibly important inside of our agribusinesses, and rigid adherence to standardized processes will always help you expose anomalies. And it can be something as simple as making sure that all of your vendor invoices are going into a particular folder inside of your email. And that way, if you have that locked in and those rules are set, if somebody spoofs spoofs a vendor and sends an email, it will automatically end up in the wrong inbox. It's that concept of making sure that we follow the rules and we have rules in place for a reason. Because a threat actor, there's always going to be ways to bypass technology, but if we have rules and processes and procedures and we have a rigid adherence to it, that will always help expose those issues. I guess to answer the other question about what should you expect from your vendors, I think that you really need to be asking your vendors, what security protocols do they have in place? What does their security stack look like? If you are using like a cybersecurity company, you need to ask who vetted their processes and their security stack. Is it warranted? Do they have their own cyber insurance policy? What does the coverage look like in the event of a breach? Because breaches are going to happen. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and we've all talked about that. But then it's what happens after the breach. That is something that nobody really wants to talk about, but that is a major piece of this. What is going to happen when everything hits the fan?
Chris, any specific stories you want to share about working with your customers on whether it's a breach or a potential situation?
Yeah, going back to the idea that our customers are going to be our biggest weakness right now. We had an incident where I think it was like $40,000 or $50,000 of invoices were being paid, and we found out that it was a spoofing attack. The issue ended up, we had to do a forensics investigation. We brought in a forensics investigation company. It was, covered by the insurance company. I think we were about 40 days, 50 days into the investigation going through logs, and the forensics company contacted us and said, hey, the investigation is closed, we're done. We found out that it was actually originated from the insurance company. And what ended up happening was another customer had been breached, and the threat actor got into their email system and contacted the insurance company. And they knew which agent to talk to, they knew what they were doing, they followed the same kind of language, cadence, and that sort of thing. The insurance agent opened up the email and clicked the link to download the PDF, and next thing you know, that threat actor sat in their system, got in touch with, got their customer roles, and identified which were the prime targets, and sent out an email on behalf of that insurance company. Everybody answered it, got in, and literally infiltrated all of their clients that way. It became a very serious issue and a very lucrative opportunity for that threat actor.
Kristie, you want to share a couple examples of some of the fraud that you look out for at Bushel on our transactional payment side as you work with that?
Yeah, so starting, we watch for onboarding fraud. Anybody, as Greg and Jake were just talking about the Bushel wallet, anytime we have anyone open it, we run a thorough KYB, KYC, know your customer, know your business screening. in which the data that user provided us can be matched back to our first-party vendors, like the Postal Service for addresses or IRS for SSNs, EINs. So we verify that the person is who they say they are. Once that account's open, we continually watch for transaction activity. We perform real-time transaction monitoring based off of their behavior. Are they doing business within their geography? Are they doing business that matches what they said they do for a living? We're just paying really close attention to what happens. So we watch a lot of different types of activity. Once we rolled out with a debit card, we're watching that in real time as well. So we're continually performing all types of different screening throughout the day with our wallets.
Nice. What's one practical step every business could take in the next 30 days to reduce risk? We'll start you here, Chris.
Educate your clients and your customers, and obviously your employees. I think that education is the place where we need to start, and raising the awareness of who we're actually dealing with on the other side. This is not just, skinny guys in a basement. These are very well-funded, highly educated organizations, and they have their own targets and their own goals and quotas to meet. And this is not a light threat, especially from a cybersecurity perspective, and it needs to be taken seriously and handled accordingly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think throughout my career, it's always been this can never happen to me because I know everybody, I live in a small community, and that does not protect us. My one piece that I'd give you from an ex-banker is to refrain from writing checks. When I pay Chris today for being on stage with me and I give him a check, think of all the data that he gets from that. Not only does he get my name and my address, my routing number, my account number, where I bank, sometimes the branch location of where I bank, but he also gets some additional data. He gets exactly what my checks look like, so he can go and recreate that check online very easily with the help of AI, as we learned this morning. He gets an approximate starting number of checks, so he can start the next one in the series. He's got my autograph, so he can replicate my signature. And if everybody here says, oh, Chris is a nice guy and you can trust him because he's done that stuff, well, I didn't bring my checkbook, so I have to mail it to him. Interestingly enough, FinCEN just did a survey at the end of 2024, and during a 6-month period, I'm going into my old memory banks, but it was like $633 billion of checks that were altered through the mail. So even if Chris is a good guy and he's not going to use this information, it might not even get to him. So mail is a huge concern as we're mailing checks. The other piece of it is, even if it gets to Chris, and even if he does nothing with it, that check passes through so many hands as it's being processed. It runs through the bank, it runs through the processing. In some cases, I'm going to want those checks, or at least images of those checks, back in my statement so I can give them to my accountant. So again, we're relying on mail. We're relying on the accountants and their employees. There's just too many hands. So my ask is this: there's just such huge risk in writing checks and monitoring those checks. The Federal Reserve Board said that over the last several years, they've had over 60% of their respondents in surveys say that they've been victims of check fraud. And if you think about that, that's a huge number.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Check washing is a major, major issue, especially in agriculture, because farms are so reliant on paper checks. The number of check washing issues that we run into is really staggering. And then, just to kind of follow up with Kristie's point, agriculture as an industry is remarkably transparent. And so if you have contracts with, government entities or agencies or those kinds of things, all of your client or your personal information is out there. And you can see, canceled copies of people's checks online, through, your local township board meeting minutes or those kinds of things. If you look at, the H2A program and the amount of information that farms are putting out there online, all that PII, that personally identifying information, is out there. And our, our producers and our growers do not seem to realize just how, unfortunately exposed they are and how much information is out there about them. And again, checks, it's really, really easy to figure out, the bank number, the routing number, the checking account number, and just get that stuff past them.
I'll just add, I think on the check discussion, there's a lot less protection on a check too. Like if you're swiping a debit card through Visa, you have dispute protections, you have fraud protections that come with that device. And so I think looking at the medium you're using to spend your money is also important.
Yep.
The other issue, just going back to the checking account and debit cards, is that, our bank accounts, a private bank account, yes, there are those protections afforded, but not in commercial accounts. You have 24 hours legally to dispute a charge on a commercial account. And again, threat actors, taking advantage of that opportunity is definitely an issue that we see a lot, because which farmer or which producer is going to be checking their checking account on a daily basis to make sure that nothing fraudulent is passed through? And that's something that most people are not aware of.
All right, we are at time. So thank you both for being a part of our panel. Everyone give them a round of applause. I'll let you two go off.